Does motherhood have to break the bank? Do you have to wait until you have found yourself to become a mother? Is building wealth as a mom something that you should feel guilty about? Those are the things that we are exploring today on the Possibility Mom Live. Does motherhood have to break the bank? This is a question I am asked all the time. How on earth do you afford life with 8 children? And believe you me, this is something that I thought long and hard about when I was becoming a mom and in the years leading up to motherhood. And in fact, I remember a very specific dinner I had with a couple who we knew and admired. At the time, I think maybe only had 5 children. Only had 5 children. They now have, I am pretty sure they just gave birth to 14. Number 14, y'all, pretty sure. And these are the questions that I 100% leaned in and asked them. Like, how do you afford food? How do you afford activities? How do you afford, not working? All the things. I think these are very, very, very common questions and natural questions when you live in a modern age where you are exchanging money for goods and services and all the things. Now, of course, I really want people to keep in mind that everywhere in the world is obviously not equal when it comes to money. There are places where you can buy a home legitimately for $200,000, where if you literally took that exact home and plunked it in another city, it would be, like $1 million. That might not be exactly the exact ratio, but I think it's fair to say, obviously, that there are different parts of the world where things cost different costs. But the premise, the rationale remains the same. It does cost money to live in modern society. So this is a really important and very natural question to ask. And a young mom named Elizabeth Bruenig penned an opinion piece in the New York Times that I want to dive right into. And it's this notion. She calls the article, it's so fun. I became a mother at 25 and I'm not sorry. I didn't wait. And in the article, she talks about how she was at this party where the majority of parents were all in their 30s and 40s, and she and her husband were in their mid 20s. And people were kind of like scratching their heads, like trying to figure out their situation. Like, are you in this fancy preschool because you're on a scholarship? Are you in this fancy preschool because of some other means? And she explores in this article quite candidly that there are many reasons why a mom would think having children is expensive. She puts all kinds of stats about the current birth rates, and why people are delaying children, and the percentage of women who make over $100,000 and had children before the age of 25 is very low. So all kinds of things. She makes this really interesting case, stating lots of different um, uh, stats on why perhaps a woman might not be inclined to have a child young in her life because of money. But she also, if you'll allow me a moment to share my screen, she also brings up this question about finding yourself and what that looks like. And do you need to find yourself before you become a mother? And I just want to read this brief passage here. But what of having children, or getting married for that matter, before establishing oneself? That is, what to say to the young person who might consider those kinds of commitments, if not for the finality of it all, the sense that she may be making somebody else before knowing who she really is. The standard issue safety warning comes to mind. In the event of an air pressure change inside the cabin, secure your oxygen mask in place before you attempt to assist other passengers you may be traveling with. They don't say, or you'll both be screwed, but you know that's what they mean. The thought certainly crossed my mind. When I got pregnant, my husband was a fledgling lawyer and I was a greenhorn journalist. A big night for us entailed walking to the local Popeyes to pick up a box of biscuits and a couple tubs of red beans and rice. Our basement apartment had orange and yellow walls and a single window mounted air conditioner with a permanent death rattle. We both knew we were still waiting to become who we would be. This was all a prelude. And then we found ourselves in a darkened room in an obstetrician's office, nervously watching an ultrasound flicker to blurry significance on a screen. The doctor pointed out a pale oblong smudge in the black bead of my uterus, and it looked like the ghost of a peanut. And then he adjusted some knob in the machine, and the wisp had an echoing heartbeat. Somehow, even after the surprise of the pregnancy itself, I still had the capacity to be stunned. And I was. We spent our first tranche of anxiety on material concerns. Would we need a bigger place? And if so, how would we afford it? How much could we possibly save before D-Day? How would we pay for prenatal care, seeing as I was still on my mother's insurance, which did not cover maternity care for dependents? Our jobs weren't steady. We had no idea when or if they would be, or if either of us was really in the right line of work. Worldly possessions, self-understanding, and confidence were all in short supply. Then she was born. One of the things they don't tell you about having babies is that you don't ever have a baby. You have your baby, which is to you, your baby, the sum of all babies. And then what I didn't understand or couldn't have at the time was that deserting yourself for another person really is relief. My days began to unfold according to her schedule, that weird rhythm of newborns, and the worries I entertained were better than the ones that came before. And there's just a beautiful, beautiful line that she says at the end. You catch glimpses of yourself in time when life shines through your inner world like a prism, illuminating all the sundry colors you contain. It isn't possible to detangle the light from the color, the discovery of change from the change itself. And I think that's all right. At 25, I nursed my newborn daughter at sunrise in a fifth-story apartment in Washington, dreamily wondering what had become of me, an erstwhile child myself. I searched her beautiful face. It's hard to discern how much in their features at that age, young and unformed as they are. But she peered up at me from the shadow of my shoulder, and I could see the umber of my own eyes taking shape in hers. There I am, I thought. There I am. You know, I've read this a couple times in preparing for this episode, and it's, as you can see, like it fills me with a lot of emotion, because I think it's the missing piece of motherhood, or one of the things that people don't really understand. Of course, there are the natural concerns of, how am I going to pay for this? Of course, especially, I now live in America, everybody. I had a baby in America where healthcare is simply different. It is simply a reality. So I totally understand the cost of having children. But when it is reduced to a cost and you don't know what you simply don't know on the other side of motherhood, and how can you know? I really do believe nothing prepares you for motherhood. You could have worked in a daycare. You could have taken care of your sister's kids. You could have, had professional training in child psychology. Not that I have any of those experiences to draw from, but I really do not believe anything prepares you for the love and the sense of duty and responsibility that comes when you have your own child. And then to bring a Catholic lens to it, which of course is my lens, this sense of, I am responsible for your soul. I am responsible for you to get to heaven, to become the kind of person who is also going to love the Lord and do good things with your life, be a light to the world. It is very difficult, in my humble opinion, to reduce that to how much does this cost. And I'm really curious if we could ask some different questions, y'all. And feel free to disagree with me or to, chime in with your opinion in the chat. I really welcome disagreement. Instead of how much or how expensive can a child be, why don't we just ask different questions? Why don't we ask a question of like, how can I build wealth? Why don't we ask the question of what can I do with my time and talents that could make having a child not seem expensive? What can I do with my lifestyle in order to welcome children? And those are some of the things that we're going to dig into with my very special guest coming up very soon, Amanda Teixeira from Wallet Win. We are going to talk about the building of wealth, if someone should feel guilty about it, and all kinds of fun things. But before we do that, I want to share with you a really fun story of this week's featured possibility mom, Beth Stoll. Beth Stoll is a dear client, a counselor, and life coach. And she has a heart for people who have experienced some kind of trauma, find healing, and find a journey through the other side. So I'm so excited to introduce you to my lovely, lovely friend and client, Beth. Let's meet Beth right here.
Do you struggle with trusting God after experiencing trauma? And do you struggle with trusting others after past hurts? And do you want to move forward in your life, but you don't know how to take action and you keep getting stuck in the past? Hi, I'm Beth Stoll, and as a licensed counselor and a life coach, I've walked with many people just like you who have experienced trauma and want to heal. But I know how difficult it can be to do so, and that is why I'm so excited to invite you into my free 5-day challenge where in an intimate, confidential, safe environment, we will journey together for 5 days to greater healing, greater confidence, and transformation in your life. In this free challenge, I will walk you through how to trust yourself, trust others, and trust God more. To join this completely free challenge, just click the button below.
That is my beautiful, beautiful friend and client, Beth. And I really want to encourage you to join us in her free challenge where she's going to be exploring healing after trauma. And trauma trauma can be an interesting word to explore or define. Trauma could be anything. Trauma could be you had an injury. Trauma could be a very challenging experience in your life. But trauma could be something like you deal with criticism, or you are frustrated by a sense of needing to be perfect all the time. That could be something that would qualify as trauma as well. So if you are interested in what it looks like to find healing and to trust yourself, trust others, and trust God more, I want to invite you to look at the link below in the description. Well, listen, here's a question for you. Here is a question for you. Is building wealth something we should feel bad about? As an entrepreneur, this is a question that I certainly struggled with when I was first starting out. I could not fathom charging anything for what I was doing when my first career was in interior design. And I remember back then being like, oh, like $25 an hour is just fine. I remember when I increased my rate to $50 an hour, just like wanting to vomit. Then when I raised it to $100, wanting to vomit, to $150. And slowly but surely, at the very end of my interior design career, it was $749 to get me in your house for a consultation. And I remember many times over having to really check my emotions and the emotions I was bringing, obviously, to this pursuit of making money. And again, it's a question I often get in my DMs on Instagram at Lisa Canning. Should I really want to build wealth, but I feel like somehow I don't deserve it? Or is it wrong? Is it selfish of me to want to make money. And that is what I want to talk about with our very special guest. So I want you to help me welcome to the Possibility, oh my gosh, the Possibility Mom Live, my dear friend and co-founder of Wallet Win, Amanda Teixeira. Amanda, welcome to the Possibility Mom Live. I'm so happy you are here. And can I tell you, I've now known you long enough that I can finally pronounce your last name right. But did I do it right? Did I actually do it?
You didn't. You know, my own parents don't even know how to spell my last name yet.
Okay.
And I've been at Teixeira for almost 10 years. So you're doing great.
Spelling, I did have to look up, although I have spelled your name many times. But welcome to the Possibility Mom Live. For anyone who might not know who you are and what you do, please share a little bit about you.
Sure. So my name is Amanda Teixeira, and my husband, Jonathan, and I co-founded Wallet Win back in 2017. And we help families and young professionals gain control of their money so that they can get out of debt, they can save money, and they can change the world through generosity. It was kind of born out of our own story back in 2011 when we got married. We did all the calculations when we got home from the honeymoon, had $25,000 in debt. At the time, we were working for ministry. We were working for Focus, Fellowship of Catholic University Students, and our take-home pay was just over $30,000 a year. So we owed as much as we brought in, and we were really scared. We dove into learning everything we could about money, ended up paying off all of that in just over 7 months, and then applied that same zeal and passion into saving and investing and home buying and adopting again and adopting again. And so many of the things that you talked about at the beginning there, as I was in the back room, Lisa, I resonated with so much. Really, we didn't know it at the time, but our kids and the calling to be parents, they were really that motivation to really go on this journey. We didn't know them in the beginning days, but we knew that when God would call us to meet them, however he was going to do that, we wanted to be in a financial position where we could say yes. So I loved that. And I was also glad that I was in the back room when you were reading that article, because the tears.
Oh, yeah. That is a very, very powerful article. So the way you and I met was in one of those adoptions. And I love sharing this story because I think it's a great story of possibility. I think it's a great story of tenacity. I think it's a great story of stepping out in faith and being brave enough to take action. So tell us what happened, how we met, and the story of the second adoption, if I'm not mistaken, right?
It was the third. It was the third. And so it was just a very surreal time. I remember meeting you in a business group. And then when we jumped on the phone, finally finding a like-minded business owner and a kindred spirit, I was so relieved and thankful for your support in that time. So the story unfolded like this. My husband had lost his day job, and that's when we had started our business Wallet Win in the late fall of 2017. And if anybody is a business owner that's watching, they know this. In the very beginning days of a business, it's a dance. How much you can actually pay yourself versus what you need to reinvest in the business. It can be it's almost like a tightrope for a little while there as you're figuring out, is this sustainable? Do we have to have other sources of income, etc.? So we launched our business and, had enough to sustain us to continue moving on, but just enough. And then about 6 months into our business, I was at a business conference actually in Toronto, Tribe Live, and I got a message from an adoption agency we'd worked with in the past, saying that one of the birth mothers of one of our girls was pregnant again, and she wanted to know if we wanted to accept the placement of this baby. We had less than 2 months to prepare, or just about that, and it would, the average cost of adoption is between $30,000 and $50,000. We didn't know what the dollars and cents would add up to in the end, but we knew it was not something we had laying under the mattress. And I was up at this conference by myself. My husband wasn't there. So it was really stressful. And I remember feeling that cold, wet blanket of negativity initially that sometimes can come over us when I looked at the bank account, it didn't have what we would need. And then you just begin feeling like, well, I guess I'm going to have to say no. And that felt sick. And I let that sit for about an hour. And then I just thought, wait a minute, this is not right. This is a biological sibling of one of our girls. Like, I want to say yes. I feel called to say yes. And then what you mentioned earlier in the show, Lisa, about ask different questions. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to ask God how to make this possible. How can we do this? We've never come up with $30,000 in any given month in our business. We're only 6 months into this thing and we're learning. But is it possible? Have other people done something like that? Yeah, they have. Oh, wait, I'm at a business conference surrounded by many of them who've done this. And they've built businesses that not only allowed their family to say yes to the things that they felt called to and cared about, but then have allowed them to make larger impacts in their communities and in the world at large. So I just put out into a Facebook group, hey, what's the fastest way to make $30,000? Totally naive and just innocent. And I told people what it was about. And a few of them happened to be at the conference and they said, meet us at dinner time and we're going to strategize with you. So we met over this dinner break. They plotted all my next 6 weeks out for me and then just said, go do this. And that's exactly what we did. And in the middle of that process, Lisa, is when you and I met. You wanted to support kind of that enrollment. We welcomed in our largest class of wallet winners to date to go through our course. We brought in just enough money for the adoption, transferred it directly to the lawyer, never saw a dime for ourselves, but we were able to cash flow this major cost, but grow our family and say yes to God's will in our life. So there they are. There's the 3 girls, Josie, Charlotte, and Ellie.
That little Ellie. So I've met them. They're so fun. You guys came and visited us not too long ago. And that little Ellie is full of, well, they all are. They're all full of joy and spunk. And they had a grand old time here with my kids. That little baby wouldn't be a part of your family today if you didn't take that action. And so tell us, because I love talking about money, what was the figure? How much money did you create by running that launch?
Oh, wow. I'd probably have to go back and look at exact budgets, but I want to say it was just over $27,000.
$27,000 in approximately 8 weeks. If this is amazing to you, if this is surprising to you, if you are wondering how on earth can that happen, let us know in the chat, because I think it's so important to talk about making money, because it doesn't have to be this thing that is this, like, I don't know, hush hush or mysterious, like kind of nebulous. Like, you and I are both in the online marketing world now. So it's a little bit of a different world than the traditional, I would say, business world, where you're going to work and where you're getting paid by someone else. It's just a little bit different. But I think that it is so worth discussing how. I remember when I was starting my journey, looking at people ahead of me on the journey, like far ahead in the journey, people who were doing launches that were like $1 million when my launches were like 1,000, people who were bringing in consistent, $30,000 months when my months were $3,000. I would look at these people and I remember I would just be like, I will never get there. But guess what? like I've made as much money in 4 months as I have in a year. And I don't say that to boast or to be prideful, but the difference for me has entirely been in asking the right questions. And I know that you have had very similar sort of emotional, like, as we've talked about it, you've had different similar emotions or questions, but you are also at a place where you are growing and building. What have been the kinds of questions, Amanda, that you've asked yourself, you and Jonathan have asked yourself, both in your family and in your business, that have gotten you to where you are today?
Well, I guess some of the questions that we've asked ourselves, I mean, most of them revolve around the, after an initial dreaming session, which I think is so important for people to do, because I think that we can tend to bury deep dreams inside of us because we assume they're just not possible. They could never happen. So a totally bizarre dream that we have in our family, or had a couple of years ago, was to own an RV and to be able to travel in it. I have another totally wild one where I want to own an albergue on the Camino.
Oh, what?
And an albergue, it's like a hostel on the Camino, and I want to host pilgrims.
Oh, come on. Oh, that's so fun.
So we have these dreams but if we don't sit down and have a dreaming session, they just won't come to the surface very easily. But once they do, it can be really tempting to just be like, well, that's never going to happen. I have a very average income. But we've challenged ourselves to ask the question of how can we grow Wallet Win to a place where it provides for the Texeiras, and at a certain point we'll have enough, and that's fine. But then what can we do beyond that? And can we get it to a point where we could build that albergue? Could we get it to a point where we could employ other people and help them provide for their families? Could we grow it to a point where we serve 1 million families across the United States, or even the world, or 10 million families? And it's scary to think about those things, but we've begun to challenge ourselves with those questions. One of those was writing a book. Should we do it someday? Well, this last year we just did. And you've written a book, so you know that it's a painful journey. It can be. But we've, asked ourselves the questions that really felt out of our comfort zone when we initially began our business. Everything was so just right in front of us. And now we've begun to dream and to think beyond just this month. And it's not survival mode anymore. It kind of had to be initially, but as stability was brought to our family, you're able to kind of bring the blinders up and look bigger and wider. And that is one of the blessings of being able to have your finances in order, is that you're not just nose down in the grindstone, blind to maybe what God's asking you. You're able to be a little more free. You have some peace in your life. You're able to say yes, to pivot where he's calling you. And you don't need millions of dollars in the bank to do that. You just need to know what your money's up to and to have a handle on it and have it working for you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And you guys have developed a really great framework for how to teach people to have a better handle on their money. And you and I are going to be jumping on a totally free webinar next week. I'm so excited about it, all on how to pay off debt and save money. And everybody go click on the link in the description below to sign up. It is completely free. And we're going to be walking through this framework for how to pay attention to what is up with your money. I love how you say it like that. So that's all very practical and very, very simple, but I'd love to pick your brain. And it is simple. I do want to actually just pause on that for a second. I think people make money, myself included, more complicated than it needs to be.
Yes.
And I will 100% own up to my complications. I'm working on my drama that I bring to money. I have learned that I have quite a bit of emotion, and it's there because of past experience. It's there.
Mm-hmm.
I've shared very vulnerably here on this platform some of my emotional experiences with money, but especially in the last year, I've had to do a lot of growing and a lot of discerning and a lot of praying through the emotions I have around money. And where I've really landed is the more we can see it as simple and in a way neutral, not something that we have to bring all this emotion to, the more money can actually serve us as opposed to us being servants to it. Do you have any? I know you have strong opinions on that, so go ahead.
Oh goodness. I mean, absolutely. What we teach financial phases and money milestones, which is kind of like the paint by numbers approach to just you once you're on this step, you go to the next and the next and the next. And our second step is actually your money mindset and getting to know what that is, because we all bring different emotions to the table around money depending on how we grew up, if we had a big win in our past or a major wince or a loss. These things impact us. And it's really important to at least come to the table with an understanding of where you're coming from. Some of those emotions can be good ones, and some of them are not going to serve you. My husband, one of his that he struggles with a lot is scarcity. His knee-jerk reaction is just, there's no money, there's never money, there won't be money. And he has to do a lot of work on himself when that rears its head. He's had so much practice in this, but when it comes up, he has some scripts that he can tell himself of, that's not true. We have money for the things that we value, and we get to decide what we're going to do with it. And then our budget is just a reflection of our current priorities. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And he just walks himself through the truth. And that can be really helpful for all of those big emotions that we do tend to have around money. I know that myself, I battled shame with money. I got into a little bit of a situation in college that landed me with a credit card bill that I didn't know how I was going to pay off. And I'd vowed that I'd never have a credit card that I couldn't pay off. And there I was in this situation. And I felt like I was, all these lies I was telling myself. I'm an idiot. I'm a loser. I'm a, just terribly negative things. But then I remember thinking, wait a minute, no, I'll just go get a part-time job. I'll pay it off, and I just won't do that again. That's it. No big deal. And the difference really is do we get stuck in those negative emotions that don't serve us?
Mm-hmm.
Or do we have a path out of it and almost use them as a way to tell ourselves the truth and then enter into a healthier relationship with money?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Amen, sister friend. So thoughts can be helpful and thoughts can be harmful. So let's talk about wealth and guilt around wealth, because, oh my word, I recently asked on Instagram, ask me whatever question you want about building wealth for your family and growing your business, and I will tackle them in some content. And I would say 50% of the content or the questions were things around feeling bad, about wanting to make more money. Like, should I, it's selfish, why do I need, I don't need anything else. Like, it was all kinds of emotions around it being superfluous or extra, or somehow there was shame around wanting more. And let's just make a very quick distinction right here, right now. There are some people who are called to poverty. Okay. So you and I are both Catholic. There are a lot of Catholics who watch this. There are also non. You understand what that looks like. There are people who are legitimately called to live a life of poverty. They might live in a monastery. They might live supported by a community where their life is provided for, and they have chosen to this. And there are people who live in the modern world, perhaps, who have been feel like they have been called to a life of poverty, work as a missionary, perhaps. Anyway,
yeah.
But I would say, and let me know if you agree with me, Amanda, that the majority of families who live in a modern society are not called to poverty. Would you agree with me on that?
I would agree.
Because we have things like mortgages. It's just the reality. It costs money to heat a home. It costs money to run water in most places. If you're one of those families who live off the grid, you're probably not watching the Possibility Mom Live. You know what I mean? Like, it's just a reality. The majority of people watching this right here, right now, live in a world where it's not possible to truly live a life of poverty, because it would not be responsible for your children. That's just that's the heart of it. It would not be responsible to your children. Now, making this distinction between wants and needs and all that thing, that's a whole other, I think, conversation. Come to our webinar to, figure out some stuff there. But I just want to make that distinction. I personally, this is a soapbox I will not get down from. I do not believe that the majority of modern families today are called to live in poverty because of the reality of what it costs to live. Okay, so putting that aside for a moment, let's talk about guilt around wealth. Why do you think it exists, Amanda, and what can we do about it?
Gosh, I mean, it can be really nuanced and complicated, but I guess I first want to preface and say that God He's got a call on each one of our lives, and it's going to look different. And some of our incomes are going to be small, others are going to be medium, others are going to be large. And so he's going to, no matter what amount of resources he entrusts us with, he's going to call us to holiness in those circumstances. And part of holiness is managing what he gives us with prudence and smart strategies. And so even on a small income, you can still live slightly below your means and have financial peace. Your life's going to look a lot more simple. Maybe there are a lot of less wants, but you've gotten all your needs taken care of. Now, most probably people watching this fall into that middle or higher income. And if they're going to be managing their money well for God, it's extremely likely that even on a middle class income, if you pay off your debt, you set aside some savings and you begin investing, by the time you're retired, you're going to have multiple millions of dollars ready and waiting for you to live a life focused and centered around generosity. And so I think sometimes where the guilt can come in is, I think it's fear. I think people are they've never had a lot of money, and they're afraid of it. And there's this false belief that poorer equals holier, when really it's just doing God's will equals holier. That's it. I mean, we could look at Saints Louis and Zélie Martin. We could look at Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati, Catherine Drexel, St. Matthew, St. Helen, St. Louis. We've had in the Catholic Church alone, tons of saints that have come from a background of wealth. The wealth in and of itself is neutral. And I think there's a common distinction here of that I think is important. Desiring to just get rich so that you can escape life, numb out, tune out, and just seek pleasures. That's not what most people are looking at. That, right, I would have a problem with that. But most people want to be able to have savings, pay off their debt, invest, so that they can take care of their family, go on date nights, buy groceries that align with their health goals, have a home and be able to keep the heat on. They want to be able to buy a car that fits their growing family, and they want to bless other people. They're not looking to, I don't know. I don't want to give there. I could say something that, context always matters.
Yes.
I don't want to label a purchase, because there's certainly purchases I make now that I would have labeled excessive back in the day.
Right.
So I don't want to get into that, but I think people are they're afraid. And I think there's some reasons behind that. I mean, Jesus does give warnings about wealth, and I think that can make people afraid of it. And he wasn't wrong that saying if money is really like any other gift that he gives us. Think of our sexuality or our intimacy. It's something that can be beautiful. It's life-giving. It's to be treasured. It's sacred. But if there's not healthy boundaries around it, it can get crazy really quick. So wealth is like is kind of like that. If you don't have the proper boundaries, emotional understandings around it, and responsibility, it could ruin a life. But if you come to the table with all of the right boundaries in place, you're building a life of virtue, you understand you're a manager of the money for God, there's no reason to fear it.
You know, for me, why I care so much about building wealth is that for me it equals impact. Like
Yeah.
what can be done with the wealth that we build? And I got to tell this story. I feel like I may have mentioned bits and pieces of it here on this platform, but I'll just tell it again very briefly. We recently went to a fundraiser for Ave Maria University. And for anyone who might be familiar with this story, it was began by a gentleman named Tom Monahan. And he has an incredible story where he did come from poverty. He had a mom who unfortunately gave up the children for foster parenting for a period, brought them back into the home, but they lived a life of quite a bit of turmoil. And he was determined. I'm only at that section. I'm only at that section of his biography, so I kind of know bits and pieces of the rest. But he eventually became very determined to build wealth, do good. So he did things like started Domino's Pizza. He bought it from his brother. It was this very small pizza establishment that he then grew to this huge chain and then sold for, I can't remember the exact stat, but like a lot of money. I don't know if he's still a part owner, but the Detroit Tigers were at once part of his portfolio of things. And he started this university, and it was fascinating because I had known bits and pieces of this story, but sitting in this ballroom for this fundraiser, I came to see a much bigger picture. Of his own equity, $35 million, if I'm not mistaken, that he just had under the mattress, so to speak. And then he went out and grabbed from his friends and sought out, fundraising, lots more money to build the school. And the thing that struck me the most, like honestly, that evening changed my life forever. What struck me about it, I've been to many different fundraising dinners, and there are causes that I love to support with my money and my time. But what struck me as very different about this particular evening was there were so many students. Ave Maria is a university. There were so many students who were featured, who were there, who were sharing their story, telling the reasons why Tom Monahan, and they all would mention him by name. They would all say things like, Tom Monahan has changed my life. I have a babysitter, and she's remarkable and wonderful. She was one of the students here at this event. And we were chatting, and then she kind of I could see her kind of like out the corner of her, like she kept looking. She was kind of distracted at one point. And she was like, I'm so sorry, but I got to excuse myself because I've got to go say thank you to my benefactor. And I was like, you're what? And she was like, oh yeah, that woman over there has paid for every single year of school. And I watched her excuse herself from our conversation, skedaddle over there, and have this conversation with this woman who, because of her generosity, had paid for this girl's education, which she was so grateful for. And that visual, Amanda, of watching my babysitter, who I know and who has told me the things about her education and her experience and how she is so grateful for it and how it's formed her and shaped her and prepared her for the world ahead and whatnot. To watch her skedaddle over there in her high heels and her beautiful dress and have this conversation with a woman who has arguably changed her life because of money. And then just back that up again, that Tom Monahan decided, I just want to take my $35 million and start a Catholic university and change a whole bunch of people's lives. And I just sort of think I left that evening completely changed because I really felt like one person actually can. And if somebody can come from abject poverty and a broken home and build all of this that I am standing in and benefiting from myself, what can be made possible if we change our questions, if we change our mindset, if we change the guilt and the shame that we might currently bring to money? What might happen? Anyway, Amanda, what is a dream in your heart currently, in addition to, or is the big dream this place for pilgrims on the?
A big dream right now?
Yeah.
Baby number 4.
Oh my God! Baby number 4. What does that mean? What does that look like for you?
I don't know. Well, I mean, that we've always had struggles with infertility, so I'm kind of looking into what I might be able to do to help support hormones or scar tissue and whatever. But we're also getting our home study dusted off, and we are going to go back down the adoption route. And maybe God will bless us both ways. I don't know. We've learned to just trust him with the details there.
Guys, we need to do another Wallet Win launch. Everybody, there's another Wallet Win launch. It's starting next week, and we this is amazing.
Yeah, so that's the big dream for 2021.
You know, Amanda, I've heard stories like that where people go down the adoption route and then they get pregnant like right when they're adopting the other baby, and then they've got 2 babies.
Our kids keep asking Jesus for twins in their nightly prayer. I'm like, okay, well, I don't. We'll let God decide that.
Oh, Amanda, it's always a joy to spend time with you. And again, I want to encourage everyone to follow these fine folks at Wallet Win everywhere you can find them, and join us for our free webinar on paying off debt and saving money. You can register. It is completely free. Just go and look in the description below. Amanda, it's always a joy to spend time with you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. Bye.
Bye. See you next week. Well, wasn't that fun? I don't know, guys. Like, here's the thing. Like, I wouldn't call myself an expert in money. I would call myself a person who has grown up a lot in a very short amount of time. That's what I would say. I would say that I am really growing to be a little bit more compassionate with myself. I think I'm growing to be a person who actually believes she can be responsible with money. I got to tell this quick story before we say goodbye. So my mindset coach, Erin Ingold, who you might remember from, I think, episode, 1 or 2. She was like one of the first guests on the Possibility Mom Live. And no, she was my second guest, because I think Mary Lenneberg was my first one. Anyway, so Erin Ingold has been doing a lot of coaching with me. And we have been diving deep into many different topics. And we did spend one call on money. And it was so funny because, we were doing this thought swap. I just kept telling myself, like, I'm irresponsible with money. I'm irresponsible with money. That's it. I'm irresponsible with money. And she kept challenging me. She was like, oh, how about we, let's replace it with, like, I'm in the process of becoming more responsible with money. And I was like, nope. And then she was like, oh, like, what about I'm growing in my ability to be responsible with money? And I was like, nope. And then she was like, what about this one? I observe that I sometimes tell myself I'm irresponsible with money. And that was the one I was able to believe. But anyways, I've been on a big journey with this, and grateful to be where I am. And here's the thing I want to end on, is that there is always hope. You can be in the most, whether it's money, whether it's mess in your home, whether it's how you yell at your kids, whether it's, I know many people here watch our videos of mental illness within marriage, whether it's dealing with that in your relationship. There is always hope. Nothing is ever lost. No matter what you think about yourself or your abilities today, it doesn't have to be the same thing tomorrow. It can change. And so that's the hope I want to leave you with. I hope you liked this episode. And hey, if you did, will you do me a favor and leave us a comment, leave us a review, share the Possibility Mom Live with a mom in your life who you might think needs a bit of hope and inspiration on her day. Thanks so much